So for those of you who are already here, welcome. We're not quite ready to start yet. We had a momentary technological adventure, but Arlene is working on getting us up onto the YouTube live stream, at which point we'll be ready to start the webinar. But while we're waiting, I just have a couple of little housekeeping things for everyone to understand. If you look under at the bottom of your screen, there's a little chat bubble. And if you click on it, you'll open a panel. And that chat function there is for all of you who are attending. You can chat amongst yourselves there. You can have an interactive conversation. We'll be looking at it as you're going along, and Erifily and I will have opportunities to interact with it. But it's really for all of you. And then later on in the program, there's going to be a question and answers opportunity. And if you look down on the bottom of the screen, you'll see there's a Q&A box. And so if you have a question that you want Erifily to address, you can actually type it in any time. If we have to wait until the question and answer period, at least it's there, because I'm sure you'll have many questions. And there will possibly also be the opportunity for you to ask your question live and on video. And if you want to have yourself on video, you need to make sure that you're ready, that you have sound available, and that your video camera is turned on. And then what we would do is you would raise your hand in your participant window. And if we see that you've raised your hand, then we'll make you a panelist. You can come on video and ask your question. At least that's what we're hoping happens. So as soon as we get the go-ahead from Arlene that it's live and happening, then we can go. So it looks like she's still loading. So we'll just give it another minute or two. We are live. So Erifily, you can unmute yourself. And I would love to welcome everyone. My name is Lavinia Plonka. I want to welcome you to this episode of the Feldenkrais Awareness Summit. And it is truly my honor. I'm totally thrilled to be interviewing Erifily Nikolakopoulou, who happens, I hope I said that right. Am I close?
Close enough.
Yeah, who I happen to be a fan of, and who is coming to us all the way from Athens, Greece. And she's truly one of those Renaissance people that you rarely have an opportunity to interact with. Erifily is an artist, a designer, a graphics person. And in fact, that was her first career. She spent her life standing in front of a computer until an earthquake literally shook her up. And she realized that movement was the thing that was most important in life. She has become since then a celebrated yoga teacher. She's an incredible choreographer and dancer. And by the way, a Feldenkrais practitioner. And she's going to speak to us today about how all those worlds can intersect and support each other, and offer us even some learning as we go along. So I'm not going to take up any more time because I know you have many stories to tell. Welcome, Erifily.
Hi, thank you, Lavinia. Well, hello, everyone. Yeah, it's true. I started off with visual graphic design. I started off looking to the outside, and then slowly became a more and more internal journey for me. And this is kind of what I wanted to talk about journeys. And this is my title, Crossing Paths, because I believe we have much to learn from different modalities. And my meditation teacher, Shinzen Yang, likes to say, and I think he got that from Charles Darwin, he likes to say that people can be lumpers and splitters. And lumpers are the people who tend to see the similarities, and splitters are people who tend to see the differences. I consider myself a lumper. I love to see the interconnectedness between fields. By no means am I a scientist, but what I have come to perceive in my journey is that I don't know if it's the way we're born, our innate humanness, if it's our education, or if it's this constant bombardment of marketing. But we kind of always look for the holy grail. We always feel that there is one thing that's right. And when one thing is right, everything else must be wrong. And this duality, in a way of thinking, is really hindering in every community. I see how much yoga people do not like to have other people come into their work, Feldenkrais people as well. We all think we know the right answer, and thus we think that everyone else is wrong. But for me, the truth is multifaceted. So I believe that each and every one of us, although our goals may be different, we still have our own journey, and we find little snippets, little facets of truth. So in a kind of way, we're all right. And even if we disagree, we still can find little snippets of ideas that we can introduce to our own path. And for me, this is very important for every community, of having the open-mindedness to work together. And it's a beautiful example that just happened to materialize for me is two of our colleagues, Feldenkrais practitioners, Stefan Wilcznik and Paul Piu-Wu, who are practitioners, and they are making right now a live webinar in a yoga garden in, I think, Malmö, Sweden. And they took this presentation, they're viewing it all together, and they will continue with real life ATMs, real life awareness through movement lessons. And they kind of build up on what I'm saying. And this is exactly what I mean by crossing paths. So, yeah, did you
want? So you have a little presentation for us that you wanted to share. So if you just hit your share screen, then we can go for it.
Okay. Let me get that. And here we go. So, the idea behind this presentation is exactly crossing paths. It's not only about yoga. It's about how much we can teach and each other. So, first of all, I would like to quote, I'm going to start in a very poetic way with one of Greece's most famous poets, Kavafi, who says, "As you set out for Ithaca, hope the voyage is a long one, full of adventure, full of discovery." So this is what I mean by journey, that we all may have a goal, but it is through the journey that we learn. So when I started my yoga journey, interestingly enough, in my yoga training, I had this assistant trainer, Japanese assistant trainer, Toshiro, who, when I was giving my test runs, my test yoga classes, he came up to me and told me, like, "Oh, you teach Feldenkrais. You should go into, do you know Feldenkrais?" And I said, "No, I've never heard the word before." And I got the book from Amazon the next day, and I read Awareness Through Movement, the first book I got. And I registered to my training without even having an actual Awareness Through Movement lesson, because it really spoke to me, this way of teaching. And that's what I consider myself primarily, and what I'm interested in is being a teacher. And through yoga and through Awareness Through Movement, I want to allow people to be themselves teachers. So for me, teaching is more of being a guide, if you will. So now, when I came out of my Feldenkrais training, with Paul and Julie Rubin, that was in 2012, my first question was, why is this method so unknown? Such a wonderful method for me, it was so exciting to find it. And I couldn't grasp the idea that it wasn't in every yoga studio, in every clinic, in every school. Children needed to learn this. So then I kind of got an answer, because I had to explain what it is. And I know so many Feldenkrais practitioners will understand that, because it's very nice to think about a nice little text for your website for a year and a half. But like this moment of introduction, hi, I'm Erifily, what do you do? Feldenkrais, what? And then you have to explain it in a sentence, and it's elusive, obvious. So the third question I had coming out of my training was, how do I use this in what I already do? In my meditation classes, in my yoga classes, in my dance classes. And I was more familiar with that. And well, the first two questions are still a work in progress, probably some future presentation. But for now, this is what I want to focus on. How do I think I use it in my work? So what is yoga for me? Because yoga has become an umbrella term. It's a word that means different things to different people. So for me, the best explanation was given by David Coulter in his book, Anatomy of Hatha Yoga, and it has been one of my mottos I keep and rewrite and put everywhere. So practicing with total attention within the body is advanced yoga, no matter how easy the posture. Practicing with your attention scattered is the practice of a beginner, no matter how difficult the posture. And this goes against the grain of all this, the Instagram era, where yoga is mostly what you see. For many teachers, it's what you feel. And what I got interested in yoga for was this idea of being more aware. Now, interestingly enough, when I was making this presentation, I came on Facebook, I found this translation by Moti Nativ. And it's a translation from Hebrew to English for the introduction of a yoga book, the first yoga book, I think, in Hebrew in 1958. And the introduction was written by Moshe Feldenkrais. And what he said, and I kind of hear the same thing, is that the essence, if so, is to learn the how and not the what, and what to do. So the essence is to learn how to practice yoga, and not this exercise or another that is important. So for me, again, it was the same idea. And when I started working, kind of bridging together yoga and Feldenkrais, that's why I named my approach Atom Yoga. And it's not the atom, it's atomon in Greek, which means individual. So now, okay, both methods look at awareness. So why do we need both of them? Well, excuse me. Yes. So then the problem was when I came into teaching after having my Feldenkrais training, that I started thinking about how am I teaching? What am I saying? And what if what I'm saying is too much? When am I overlapping with my students' will? And one of the things I got off Feldenkrais was to kind of find this fine balance of when to allow for other people to search for themselves, when to stop being a teacher and start to being a guide. So this is, many of you probably will know it, the sensory homunculus. It's a distorted representation of the human body based on a neurological map of the areas and proportion of the human brain, dedicated to processing sensory functions for different parts of the body. I'm not a neurologist, but I am an artist. And what I saw in this picture was the idea that each and every one of us kind of has this body image, this homunculus, that is a bit different. So a pianist might have much more sensibility in his fingers than I, or a dancer, or a tennis player. So we kind of form our image. So what I thought was that although there is some basic anatomy and there are some basic poses, and we're all humans, we come all in more or less the same womb. We have almost the same skeleton. We have almost the same body ideas, body images. But this almost is so important, subtle, is significant. So how could I teach people who are so different? And how do I know what is right for them? And then moving along in anatomy, I found Paul Greeley, who's a wonderful yin teacher, yin yoga. And he made these workshops about his study on bones. Because when I started learning anatomy, I was looking at the same text, and it was always more or less the same skeleton. And nobody addressed that even in our bone structures, there's so much differentiation, from the difference in femoral rotation, the difference in the inclination of the neck, the difference in the length of the neck. And that's just our hip. So we think of the skeleton as some generic image we saw in the 6th grade or something. But our skeletons, our bones, are as different as our faces. So now I came to the realization that my students are very, very different in subtle but very significant ways. And how can I know what is right for them? And I started teaching even less and guiding even more. So I came up with this idea that we are individuals. We are unique in every way. It's not just our faces, it's our bone structure. It's not our character, it's also our perception of self. And how do we discover our limits, our blind spots? We ask the experts. And as far for me as the body is concerned, we are our own experts. And if we learn to listen with awareness, we become our own teacher. And this is what I consider to be the Feldenkrais way of teaching, to ask more questions and to give less answers, and to be the guide for people to find their own answers. So I kind of think of it as a teacher training. So that's why, for me, Feldenkrais was so important, because apart from the physicality of it all and the learning, the different way of learning, there's also a shift in the way of thinking. And I have found with Feldenkrais and incorporating it into yoga that I had a much easier way to get to the blind spot. Because yoga takes time and it takes effort. It takes effort to be aware at 10 in the evening. For my students, they work all day and they have to come in, they want to relax, and I have them paying attention to themselves. It can be tiring paying attention to yourself. So it's a process that starts, and then you have to continue and do it. And it's, in order to be feeling that you're doing yoga, you have to do it for quite some time. It doesn't shift your body from one lesson to the next. And sometimes, and I found that with myself, that there were blind spots. And when you're shedding light, yes, you can kind of make it less dimmer and make it more clear in some areas. But when you have a blind spot, it's almost impossible to actually shed the light there. So for me, what Feldenkrais did for my classes and my teaching was to find a way to actually shed light on those little blind spots I couldn't access as a yoga teacher, for myself, for my students. So this is my presentation. I've stopped sharing. Good, we're good.
Well, thank you so much. And of course, as I'm listening to you, lots of questions come up for me about sort of, Feldenkrais said to us that we should take the work and put it in our own handwriting. So I want to ask you about how you have taken the Feldenkrais teaching and put it into your handwriting. For example, you were talking about how you teach these classes late at night and you're bringing awareness to your yoga students. Do you use Feldenkrais principles or do you actually use Feldenkrais movement in the yoga class?
Well, I don't like to call it Feldenkrais movement, but I think it's what I feel, and it's difficult to express, is that the changes I've seen are so internal that for a lot of times it's very difficult for me to explain, because it's a shift in the way of viewing. To be able to allow my students to go where they need to go instead of trying to explain the right way was a big shift for me. Yes, I do. I do also take snippets, but because Feldenkrais for me is not movement. They're not movement ideas. It's for me, it's more theoretical than that. So yes, I do take parts of ATMs, and in fact, if you care to look in my YouTube channel, I have few due to time constrictions, but very interesting snippets about how I go blending an ATM, an idea of an ATM into a yoga pose. And I will be sharing a very simple one today also, so mostly so you can get the gist of it.
Great. And so, a lot of the people who are on here are in some way or another either Feldenkrais students or Feldenkrais teachers. So we all have an attitude of how, Feldenkrais can inform everything. But I'm just wondering if you could say anything about how yoga could inform Feldenkrais.
Sure. Yeah, this idea of crossing is not one way, and especially with Feldenkrais, it's interesting that I believe that because when you have an awareness to movement lesson, you kind of feel you discovered things by yourself. You don't attribute anything to the teacher or to the medicine. Like, oh, I found that out. I'm so smart. At least that's how I felt. And I feel that because it's this way of learning that is coming from within, we tend to kind of think that we discovered the wheel in a way. We tend to forget that there was this genius, in my opinion, guy who thought of it all. You forget that, like, it's his way of teaching. And then you get down on the mat and you do an awareness to movement, you discover something about your body, and you're exalted and you say, oh, I discovered something for myself. And that's the actuality of the teaching, is that, yes, what he gives to you is exactly this, the way to learn by yourself. And this is also what I'm interested in. But this, I believe, makes us a bit smug in the way that we think we discovered it by ourselves. And then we kind of think that, oh yeah, but yoga's for the masses. It's a lesser thing. And we kind of compare all the time what we could do better, why ours is better. And I think that we have a lot to learn from other modalities as well. Right now, there's yoga therapy, which is a specific certification. And there are like many teachers who are involved in somatics and in all this new way of thinking. And they're doing to yoga. They're not constricting yoga into what Krishnamacharya said. They are evolving yoga. And I think that we need also to find a way to evolve and keep ourselves open to possibilities, to ways of crossing our paths. Because we may know everything, but it's still just a facet of the whole truth. It's like this Indian parable of the elephant and the blind people. And each of them touches a part, and they touch the leg and they say, oh, it's a tree, and they touch the tail, it's a serpent. And all of them are wrong, and all of them are kind of right if they would just start talking to each other and compare notes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, you know, it's interesting. As you're speaking, I'm thinking to myself, there are so many awareness through movement lessons that are influenced by yoga or even based in yoga. In some of the transcripts, even, you know, Moshe wrote the name of the pose that it would lead us to. And we speak a lot in our culture about how judo and the martial arts have influenced the Feldenkrais method. And people talk about it, but it's not often that we really look at or inform ourselves about where these other lessons came from that were directly influenced by yoga. So, you know, I guess it is about kind of expanding our awareness. And, you know, that kind of brings me to my next question, which is it enough to just do Feldenkrais? And I guess everyone will have a different idea. Is that enough for each of us, or is it important for us to find ways to collaborate and work with other fields? And I just wondered how you felt about that.
Well, it really depends on what you want to do and what your goals are. But for me, like Moti Nativ said it on Wednesday in his presentation very well, like taking it out to the world and being able to use it in an environment, in a shifting environment. So for me, if we consider Feldenkrais as a tool, it could be used in whatever you do. I've seen wonderful work from people who use it and in their own capacities. There's this wonderful book. I failed to remember the name because I got this from my mother, who's a piano teacher. And there's this Feldenkrais teacher who's also a pianist. And he teaches in a university status. He doesn't teach children. And he wrote this book about Feldenkrais in piano lessons. And I cannot tell you personally, but my mother is ecstatic about it. So I think Feldenkrais on its own is very powerful and very interesting. And it can be used with people with, like the work with children that's being done. It can be therapeutic in a way, but it also can be a tool for anything. Anything can be done better through the awareness of Feldenkrais, in my idea. And that's why I love it. And that's why I want to give a presentation, because I feel very strongly about it.
But why do you personally feel it's important to collaborate with other fields? That's the part that's interesting for me.
Because I think there's things we might want to know also. For example, one of the things I've seen is through awareness through movement, which I have taught a lot less than I would like to, because it's very difficult to get people into the room, especially in Greece, where it's not that well known, where a handful of practitioners, some from abroad, some from the Greek training, and we all trying I've been talking to people and all have the same difficulties getting someone in the room. I know you love it, just try it. But, you know, circumstances are difficult here. It's a lot more difficult to get someone into the room. And one of the reasons I have been working is my connection with yoga. Because when I put a snippet in yoga, they don't know what it is, but they get it. And then they come and say, oh, what was that? And it's kind of, I think that it's a kind of pathway to get into Feldenkrais. If we can have practitioners introduce it into other modalities, into Pilates. I'm looking forward to that presentation as well, because I think it's a way to get it out in the world. Just like meditation. Meditation was a thing for monasteries somewhere in Nepal. You see now there's meditation everywhere. Google has meditation sessions every day. Meditation is an amazing tool as well. And Feldenkrais is also. And I think that we need to find this platform to get it out into the world and mix it and combine it with our other things, because it's good for everyone.
You know, it's interesting what you're saying. You're reminding me of when I started my practice 100 years ago. And one of the people in my training who's no longer with us, but she was a wonderful Vini yoga teacher and a Feldenkrais practitioner. Her name was Didi Eisenberg. And we lived in the same state, and I was struggling because I had all these yoga students, but I couldn't get them to come to my Feldenkrais class. And she went, call it yoga. Everything is yoga. Yoga is union. So once I started to integrate Feldenkrais into my yoga class, that was when the students started to come to the Feldenkrais classes. So the same thing, we're continuing to integrate. So I think this is a perfect moment for us to integrate, don't you?
Yeah.
Oh, you have one more thing to say. Go.
One more thing, speaking of what you said with the yoga is everything. Yes, but we've seen also how that has continued and opened up so much that now there's beer yoga. Yoga. So, you know, between marketing and crossing paths, for me, there's a real distinction, because fusion is, I dance a thing called tribal fusion. And one of the things that I always had in my heart about fusing things is that you have to be respectful of what you're fusing. And this bombardment of marketing has us right now. You can open up your computer and you're bombarded with Pilato, yogi, Bollywood, shushum. Marketing is one thing. Respecting and really learning traditions is another thing. And one of my favorite quotes is Bob Dylan, who said that in order to live outside the law, you must be honest. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So for me, there is a differentiation there.
Thank you for that. And what a great quote. So I understand that you have a little bit of an awareness through movement experience for us.
Yes, it's very small and very simple, because first of all, I can't see the participants, and I'm used to feedback from real live bodies. So I want to make sure that everyone can feel it correctly. It's not about doing it correctly, it's more about feeling. So the first thing I want you to try has to do about how we perceive awareness, how we perceive differentiation. So now, as you are sitting, hopefully somewhere that's rather sturdy, not those computer chairs with the weird ergonomics. If you just start to move your pelvis just a bit forwards and backwards, just rolling a bit on your sit bones as if it was a rocking chair. And now find the highest point of your sit bone and stand there. And if you close your eyes, you can lift your hands and then put them back down. And you can sense, do it slowly, so you can sense how heavy are your arms, how heavy are your shoulders. So now let's do a computer stance. Let's roll our pelvis a bit back so you're kind of sitting on your sacrum after hours of working on a computer, for example. So now lift your hands. So I'm presuming that most of you can sense that they're a bit heavier. And again, if you roll up and you sit on your sit bones, they get lighter again. Because you're using your bone structures to handle the weight. You're not doing it just by the sheer power of your back and shoulder muscles. So this is a very simple example. But as you do awareness through movement, these sensations, these differentiations becomes finer and finer and finer. And that's also a difficulty with awareness through movement, just like in meditation, that it takes time to start really feeling, to start really accessing that part where you can relax enough to get the feedback. Even if you don't understand it, sometimes there are no words. You could not describe what you're feeling to someone else, but it's still there. You can feel that there's a difference. So now since now you kind of felt this idea of what we're looking for, what I want you to do, I hope you have a yoga block or a big thick book you could rest your foot on, and you can put it next to you. So I would need you to stand up. And what I'm gonna kind of tease you with, one idea that it took me years to understand was the concept of grounding in yoga. All the teachers all the time, ground through your feet. But grounding was really something I couldn't understand till recently. What exactly did they mean? And maybe they don't mean the same thing. It's just what I feel grounding is. So as you stand with your feet flat on the floor, again, take a moment to feel the weight of your bones and to feel the way your feet are standing on the ground. So now very, very gently start shifting from side to side and feel how you move the weight from one foot to the other. Okay. Nice. So come back to center and release your knees, bend them a little so they're soft, nice and soft. And as you inhale, think of pushing the ground and lifting up your hands, like in mountain pose. And exhaling, release back down. And again, think of pushing through your knees, through your ankles to the floor as you inhale and lift your arms up. And kind of feel the connection from your arms to your head, to your pelvis, to your ankles, to the soles of your feet. So now what I want you to do is take the yoga block or book and put it under your left foot. So you're kind of now stepping up. And again, start shifting your weight. Yeah. And as you shift, just imagine pressing down onto the block. It's exactly the same movement we're doing coming up the stairs. You're pushing through your hip, knee, and ankle down to the block, and then you're releasing down with your other foot. It's kind of a gentle release to come back to your right foot. And just really feel this way of connecting, of pushing the weight, hip, knee, ankle, foot. Very nice. And you can come back to center and take the block away and again shift a bit from side to side. You can feel the left and the right foot and the left and the right knee, the left and the right hip. I'm moving too, I'm sorry. And then change sides. So you can take the block, put it under your right knee. So now you already know what you're doing. You're kind of pushing down. you're coming up the stairs. And there's a lot more things going on in your calf and in your hip and in your glute. There's a lot more power involved into pushing down than to just releasing back on the left. And what we're doing, we're just experiencing that difference. And the quieter the body is, the more time you have to feel and absorb the difference. Okay. So now you can take the block away and just shift from side to side. Feel the hip bones to feel the knees, the ankles. So now next time you inhale and want to come out to your mountain pose, push down on those little blocks under your feet. Imagine they are still there. So you're pushing with both feet into the ground, just as if you were coming up the stairs. But instead of one hip, now both are engaged. So you inhale and you press down through your hips and your knees and your feet to lift your arms. And it kind of feels just as the swimmer who comes at the end of the swimming pool and pushes the wall to get momentum. Kind of the same feeling. Instead of lifting through your hands and trying to grasp, think of pushing through the floor. So you're using the floor to lift your arms. Just like the swimmer at the end of the swimming pool. And that's it. How was it for you, Lavinia?
Actually amazing. We talk in yoga a lot about grounding and feeling the ground supporting you. But this idea of connecting it with the idea of stepping on a stair really gives you a sense of how the ground comes under your feet. And then because of that, it was actually easier to raise the arms. So if I ever go back to teaching yoga, I'm going to steal that idea. I think that is really, really wonderful.
You're most welcome. It's already on YouTube for people to acquire.
Okay. But I will give credit where credit is due. I love to do that. So we have at least one question, and let me check in with this person. So I'm getting the impression that maybe, because I don't see any hands up at the moment. So if you have a question and you'd like to be on camera, please raise your hand. Otherwise, I will read the questions to Erifily as they come in. So I'll keep on scrolling through the raising hand part. Oh, I do have a couple of hands up too. And one of them is the questions. So I'm going to promote Beth and let her speak as well and see if it actually works. So do you see Beth?
Yes, I can see Beth. I think she's muted, but I can see her.
Let me, I put allow to talk, but let me try it again. Where did you go, Beth?
Maybe she
right. No, I unmuted her. So you should be able to speak now. No?
My question was whether you have a particular body of material within the Feldenkrais materials that are out there that you use for to integrate into your yoga. If you were using, Alexandrian eye lessons, or you stick to materials from some of his books, or what your resources commonly are.
Well, thank you. What I usually work with is Alexandrian eyes. I've also worked a lot with videos from other Feldenkrais practitioners because this idea of making things into snippets, sometimes I get ideas off of the internet, mostly it's Alexandrian eye. But what is interesting for me is that what I discovered was at some point I felt like I had to do ATMs almost every day. I wanted to be a good student. And back then, it kind of wouldn't integrate into my work. So one of the things that I found that worked, that even if it's an audio I bought, if it's the Alexandrian eye text, what I found very important for me was not to rush. And it's been about 2 or 3 years now, when I started doing this integration into yoga, that I've been doing one awareness through movement for myself a week, maybe even in 2 weeks. And what I have found is that this, when I give myself and I give my body and my brain this time to integrate, it kind of comes out in my lessons by itself. I don't need to think about it. While as before, I was trying to be a good student and I was overloading myself. So if you're interested in working into yoga, Feldenkrais into yoga, one of my tips would be, do not rush. We don't need to be the perfect university students. It's not that kind of idea. We need to slow down. And that means also slowing down our pace, not only in the awareness through movement, but in between as well.
Great. Thank you, Beth. I'm going to put you back into attendee. And we've got several other hands up. So let me just grab Arona. And let me put it allowed to talk. And let me unmute you. I have this whole process here. Okay, you're on.
Okay, I was having a hard time trying to type it all out. I love the union of yoga and Feldenkrais, though I do it separately. And I too went through the whole thing of, do I need both? Do I need either? And I find with Feldenkrais, I finish a lesson, I feel like a Spider Woman. I could climb up a wall. But with yoga, this is just a brief preamble. I was going through a hard breakup, but I was doing 3 hours of yoga that time of my life. You get these 30 classes unlimited a month, and I was doing it all and still running short. I left a yoga class, and there was this indelible smile. So while I feel like a Spider Woman with Feldenkrais, I feel just simply happy with an inexplicable smile on my face. So I love that. The thing that I'm curious about, that I wrestle with in yoga, is that I find the use of the word push, meaning push the floor, is kind of overused. And so I studied yoga with body mind centering with Bonnie, and I prefer the idea of reaching rather than pushing, because when pushing, it pushes me away from the floor. And when it comes to handstands, I'm sure it's my interpretation, and there's a whole bit of me involved in the interpretation. But how do you, so that's one, is just how we use push versus reach, or to the floor, or push the floor versus push through the floor, which I heard you say, push through the floor, which to me connotes reach. And then that's one. And two, Feldenkrais often, again, I'm generalizing, but Feldenkrais often suggests doing the harder part of the movement on an exhalation. And I'm playing with yoga on how the movement begins on an inhale and then an exhale. So the use of the word push and the coordination of harder movements, or the belly of the movement, on an inhale versus exhale. Thank you. I love your presentation.
Thank you. Well, it's interesting because I've had the same thoughts, and they shift from time to time. I feel that I'm researching everything, and Oops, we're having feedback. Can you hear it, Lavinia?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. So yeah, well, about pushing and reaching, for me, all of these dualities, inhaling, exhaling, pushing, lifting is something I feel much more interested in finding out instead of finding the right answer. So when I'm teaching, I'll have my students do both. And it's interesting also for me because then I can see how do they experience it, what feels better to them. So from time to time, I could be pushing, asking them to push or asking them to reach and interplay between the two, push and then reach and then push. So I think that there's this layering of ideas. And then the more you try and differentiate between them, the more interesting they are. So for me, it's just how many more ideas can I get? Can there be other verbs apart from push and reach? That's what's interesting to me, to find between pushing and reaching, which we'll try in the same exercise, in the same asana, the same exercise, the same moment. How can there be also a spectrum between them? So I don't have any concrete answer because these are the things that are in my path that I'm looking for as well.
So it's interesting to me hearing that because it begins the question of our movement vocabulary versus the vocabulary of words, to kind of feel that. Well, thank you, Arona, and I'm going to put you back to attendee, and hopefully we can get to everyone that has their hand up, but let me see what. So Daniela. And let me unmute you, Daniela. Just hold on one second.
I'm here and I see you.
Okay, so yeah, we have a couple more questions and we only have a few more minutes, but we wanted to get these in.
I was very thankful for the question of Arona because for me, it was like at the moment where I didn't have a block, so I took something soft. So it was interesting because the foot was going into the soft thing, but the body was going away from the floor. It's like in the knee, it's like one part is going down and the other is up. So you push in two directions. So, okay, it's just a beginning. If the pushing is in one direction away from, or one it's in and one it's away, yeah, it's just material for thinking. And I must tell you, Erifily, I'm very thankful. I always try to see how would it be if I'm a newbie to the method. And today I was a very happy newbie with you. I understood what the Feldenkrais method could be. Thank you.
I do have an answer for your first part of the question, because actually you went forward in the exercise.
Okay.
Because, when I was making up this presentation, I decided on a firm block because this is how I usually start teaching this exercise. With my dance students, for example, and I see one over already looking at me through the presentation, we do it with rolled up yoga mats or towels. And then what you are saying happens, that there's simultaneously, you can also feel the floor getting down.
Yeah.
You know, feel this spring thing.
And the body up. Yeah.
And then when we continue to do this, it can become like a very, very, you kind of open up the towel and see if you can still feel this pushing down with the thinnest possible material. But
beautiful.
Yeah, when I am online, I try to make things really simple and concrete because I prefer getting everyone, and maybe someone who already knows gets bored, but.
It's very inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and we've got one more. that we'll try to squeeze in here. And that is Stefan. And
oh, and there's also Deborah wrote in the webinar chat.
right, I saw that. You want to answer that while I bring Stefan up?
I have Deborah on my Facebook. So what I said was a quote from Moti Nativ, and his the book, I think it's called Yoga and Health. It's in Hebrew. It's from 1958. But if you go to Moti's page, because I asked him if I could use this, I'm sure he will also can give it to you, and I can also send you the his original post if you're interested.
So, and that reminds me, but I just want to say, Stefan, for some reason, you're coming up as two different things, number 1, 2, 3, and Stefan. And there's no image or icons for microphone or video. So I'm not sure whether it's a technical glitch.
I think so, because they're doing a viewing with many people. So I think they might also having some trouble.
So if you have to, Stefan, you may just want to type your question in or your announcement. But on this note, there is a Facebook chat group that is being, I think, is Stefan, somebody like that was the moderator.
Yeah, I think it's Stefan.
Yeah, and it's happening after this. So if people have more questions, and that might be another place where you want to share the quote that you were talking about. And I think that Arlene is going to put into the chat the link for the Facebook chat group, so that those of you who want to continue this dialogue after Erifily, I think, is going to be happy to join that. Yes, is that true?
Of course.
And this is also a perfect moment to tell us a little bit about some things that you have to offer. I mean, we've put in your website and different ideas in the chat, but I know that you wanted to talk about your work with Insight Timer and a couple of other projects that you're involved in. So maybe in the last few minutes, you can share that with us.
Okay, yes, Insight Timer is a project I'm very excited about, because it's a free app and there's many meditation teachers. I'm still a meditation student. Of course, in meditation, like in Feldenkrais, you never stop being a student. But I started a few years ago, my first steps into doing guided meditation as a teacher. And I was very happy, because in Insight Timer, I have 6,000 views or 25,000 views, and some crazy numbers that I've never experienced before. So if you're interested in looking up what I do, I usually do very simple meditation techniques, and I try also to incorporate a little bit of Feldenkrais in that as well, although it's still baby steps, it's in its early stages. And yeah, you can also, if you're interested in the yoga Feldenkrais crossing, I also have a YouTube channel. Unfortunately, I don't have the time to do every week as most YouTubers. I'm not a YouTuber. I just, what I find interesting is that I work with exercises for a year with my students, my workshops, and then I make a sum out of it, and I put a 3-4 minute video just to give the idea and to share something, because as you might have found out, I'm very into sharing, and I want people to know that. I don't want to keep every little mystery for myself.
Well, and sharing is also how we learn.
Yeah.
How we become richer from each other. We become richer by sharing, not by holding on, right?
Exactly. It goes stale and dies then.
Exactly. And I think that Arlene added a link to the app. The Insight Timer is an app for the phone, and I actually use it for my meditation timing. So it's a really cool app, and it's wonderful that Erifily is part of that. So anything else you want to say in closing?
Well, apart from thank you very much for taking up the time on a Saturday to stick into your computer once more. I'm very happy you could join me, and I'm very happy I could share all my thoughts.
Well, it was absolutely a pleasure to see you in this way. Thank you so much. And so this was our interview with Erifily Nikolakopoulou, and I'm Lavinia Planka. I did it wrong again. You say your name.
I love it. No, I love it. It's Nikolakopoulou, but even Greek people never get it right. So don't worry about it.
I missed a syllable. No, that was great. Thank you. And
thank you so much, Lavinia.
And I want to just remind everyone that that this summit is continuing on until May 8th. We're celebrating Feldenkrais Week. And so please join us for some others. We're looking forward to seeing you. Thank you very much and see you all soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.